Welcome to the Kazoo community training. Today we're going to be going through setting up an all-in-one server to run Kazoo. Now Kazoo is a VoIP platform. It relies on multiple open source projects. Its goal in the project is to act as kind of like something that brings it all together, like a glue that binds it, makes it easy to work with, instead of them being disparate open source projects. Now, some of these projects that it makes use of are things like RabbitMQ for the message bus, Kamailio for your SIP session border controller, Freeswitch to do all your media, BigCouch, or what we'll be using today, CouchDB, to do your database, HAProxy to do your proxying of your database and other services, and then itself will be running Kazoo applications that are run on Erlang and Monster UI for the web front end. Now, you can always check out this stuff. The commercial version is over at 2600hz.com. The open source version is available at 2600hz.org. If you want to support the project, feel free to contribute to the 2600hz.org. I know they want a lot done with the documentation. Or if you want to run it as full-time telecoms infrastructure and you've got a lot of clients and you want them to run it for you and provide some additional applications specifically built around call centers, then reach out to the commercial division. We're going to be dealing with the open source edition today. That means you will not get access to some of the applications like Call Center Pro and things of that nature, but you can run it yourself and play around with VoIP infrastructure. Now, over on the 2600hz.com/architecture website, it has an overview of how it all talks to each other. This is a good high-level thing. This one will show 3 different zones. Today we're just going to be doing one server that runs everything. But you can see over to the right, you've got your Kazoo database, which will be CouchDB or BigCouch. You've got your message bus, which will be RabbitMQ. Kazoo apps and the conference billing, all that kind of stuff, will be what actually Kazoo is all about, the applications. Then you've got your SBC running Kamailio and your media server running Freeswitch. Now, over to the terminal, I have a blank fresh server here running CentOS 7. So we're going to go ahead and use this to build out our server. As always, you want to make sure everything's up to date. So sudo yum update y and sudo yum upgrade y. That's how you know it's the fresh server, because you usually get that only once. But here we go, installing all of our packages, or all of our updates, I should say. Now, while that update goes on, just so we're not watching a screen scroll by, you can always find a text version of the installer over at docs.2600hz.com. This is updated quite often, and it's quite good. It'll take you through a basic setup if you want to read instead of watch a video and see someone else do it. It will at least get you a base system running. In future videos, we'll go through building out a scaled cluster, doing things like encrypting your CouchDB or BigCouch replication, encrypting your message bus, and things of that nature. Likewise, we're going to get our packages from packages.2600hz.com. The current stable release at time of recording is 4.3. I know they're working on 5.0, which I believe is available in the experimental branch at the moment. The one thing we will not be using from those packages will be BigCouch. We'll be using CouchDB. Now, they say in the install guide that it works, but they use BigCouch because it's got the proven track record. They've been running it for a long time. I personally have been running it on CouchDB for 5 years, I think. Probably about 5 years, and it's been fine. As always, if you have like networking issues that cause quorum problems, you know, it can cause your cluster to become unstable and cause funky stuff to happen. But for the most part, it works perfectly fine. The only conflict I've ever seen it have is running CouchDB on the same node that is running the Kazoo applications. Mostly because they're both issues with like the Erlang versions that they each use. I've seen them depend, you know, if one application crashes and then it tries to start up in the wrong sequence, it just won't start. So you've got to stop certain services and start CouchDB first, and then so on, so on, so on. All right, back over to our terminal. Our updates are done. Fantastic. We're going to want some quality of life base packages first, like the extra packages, Yum Utils, PCMISC, PSMISC, Nano, wget, all those kinds of things. So let's do that right now. So let's yum install y epel release sudo. I normally run everything as root, which is really bad of me, so I'm trying to get out of that habit. So expect me to forget to write sudo a lot. Sudo yum update, just to pick up the epel file lists. See an update for itself already. Now let's do some of those extra packages. Nano, wget, yum utils, nettools. I think that's probably a good start. All right, so now we've got some quality of life packages. Now what we want to do is we want to get the repo for 2600 Hertz. So back over to our browser, if we go to where this package is, you'll have the RPM, so let's just copy that link. This is over again over at packages.2600hertz.com/CentOS/7/stable, etc. You can see the address up here. So back over to the terminal. Now that we've got wget, we can fetch the RPM, and then RPM-I with sudo, of course, the 2600 Hertz. And then if we go sudo yum update, and we don't hit the wrong letter, you'll now have 2600 Hertz stable in your repo list. Okay, so then we can move on to installing Kazoo. Just before we go any further, I do have my hostname set up as ao.kct because this is going to be an internal network only. It's not going to be exposed to the internet, and I'm not going to be adding my public carriers to it at this point in time because I don't feel like publishing that on YouTube. So for the time being, ao.kct is fine. I also have an internal IP address of 192.168.1.99, and we're going to use that when we start doing things like the web front end and all that kind of fantastic stuff. Typically what you want to do is set up a public hostname for yourself. If you're using one server, you could just use it called pbx.mydomain.com. If you're using a multi-server setup, which we'll do in another video, you would want to call it, something like sbc01.myzone.mydomain.com. Things along those lines. All right. So, another big thing with VoIP is time synchronization. An NTP server would be really good. We can simply install this with sudo yum install yntp. Done. And then sudo systemctl enable ntpd. Sudo systemctl start ntpd. And then we can see our time service is running. I would also highly, highly recommend that you run all your servers in UTC. It's way better for logging, and it's just, you're gonna trust me, you're gonna find it a lot easier to deal with if all your servers are set to UTC. All right, so you can go through and try to install each of the packages one at a time, which is perfectly fine if you're trying to do multi-server setups. So you have one that's running your session border controller, one that's running media, and so forth and so forth. For this purpose, we're doing an all-in-one, so we just want to install everything. So let's just clear this out. Now let's see how well this goes with just trying to install Kazoo right off the bat. So yum install y Kazoo with a little sudo in the front. Right, it's found all of our dependencies and it's going to go through and install each of them. Now, while that's going on, I'm going to prepare and set up my CouchDB repo. I much prefer CouchDB over Big Couch. So I'm just going to open up another tab because I'm using SuperPutty here. Now let's head over to our browser where we go to the CouchDB install. Now, I know the latest version of CouchDB is 3.10. We are going to want the latest version of 2.3.1, most likely. If you do want to run version 3 or try running version 3 or later, you may want to look at running it on its own server instead of on the all-in-one. So let's scroll down to CentOS, and it instructs us to create the .repo file. So sudo yum, sudo nano, over to our terminal, and put in the text that it gives you in the box that's easy to copy and paste. So let's put that in there. Done, our repo is enabled. Likewise, Kazoo is now installed. Cool, now I've got to remember installing a specific version. Guys, does my memory serve me right? Or am I going to have to Google it? That works. So here's all of our versions of CouchDB. And we're going to want 2.3.1. The last one on the 2 branch. So let's sudo yum install CouchDB dash 2.3.1-1 EL7. So this is where we're going to run into our problem. There's differing versions. All right, so it wants 185.19. So this gives us a conflict with our Kazoo Big Couch package. All right, so we're not going to be using that. So yum sudo yum remove Kazoo Big Couch. Okay, so now CouchDB is installed. Keep in mind, if you go the other way around and install CouchDB first and then try to do what I did on the other tab, which is just install all of Kazoo, it will complain because it can't find the dependencies for Kazoo Big Couch. So you would need to go through and install each of them one by one. As I said, going through the docs, it takes you through doing exactly that. Now, I want to set up my CouchDB so that I can have a database ready so that when I start spinning up all of these other applications, it has somewhere to write to. So, CouchDB, for whatever reason, you would normally go to like a etc and look for CouchDB, but you'll notice it's not there. It'll be in opt CouchDB, and it has the etc folder here. Make your life easy and create yourself a symlink. So let's create the symlink. Sudo ln s opt CouchDB etc to etc CouchDB. So now if we go sudo ls al etc CouchDB, and then we go into the folder, we can see each of our files that we want, which is fantastic. Now we can start editing these config files to set up our CouchDB instance. Two of the main files we're going to be dealing with are going to be the local ini and the vmargs file. So let's deal first with, let's do local ini first. Let's just sudo nano local.ini. Here's the default ini file. It's going to have a lot of settings in here, a lot of defaults. We're going to go through and tailor these for our specific setup. So for our settings, we can set some of our timeouts, some of the other per user settings, and cluster node configuration for per user stuff. We're not going to be dealing with any of that. This will be if you want to change the default port, which we're not going to want to. The bind address, we're going to want that open, so that other things can get to it. This is where you'd go through and set up all your SSL stuff. There's also a lot of stuff that you need to do if you want to have the replication to be encrypted as well, which is ideal, but we'll deal with that another time. Likewise, to create a admin, this is where we do it. Now, if you enter in a password, which is this my secret password thing, as plain text, when you start the database for the first time, it'll hash it. Do not do this and make your password admin or password, because this is not going to be exposed to the internet. That's exactly what I'm going to do, but never do that for production. Okay. I think that's about all we need. Where's our other, do we have any other bind addresses that we need to deal with? CHTTP bind address 5984. I don't think we do. May need to come back if I've forgotten something. Let's just save that file. And let's edit the vmargs likewise. All right, some of the main things in here is to give it a proper name. Now, if you're using actually fully qualified domain names, you'll want to enter it into here. Okay, CouchDB at your domain. So I'm going to use aio.kct. Your cookie, do not set it to monster. All right, create your own cookie. It can be as convoluted as possible, or you can create it using a file. I'm just going to use the most horrible randomization method possible, which is called mashing the keyboard. Okay, number of pull threads, I'm going to set that to 32. On their version, sorry, they use 25 threads, and in BD no input, sorry, at the end of it, we want to do max. Set our max ports. Now, don't remember if I need to add the detached command to the VM args for this. If the service doesn't start properly, I will need to. So let's just write it without it first. Sudo systemctl start CouchDB. It's running. Okay, so doesn't need the detached. Pretty sure if it does, if we put the detached command in there, and we try to run it as a service, it'll fail because it will lose track of the PID. So let's just enable Couch. So we should now have it running. Now I still won't be able to get to it because I have SE Linux enabled and the firewall is running. So sudo firewall cmd list all zones. So what's my active zone? It's public at the moment. Again, I should probably configure trusted for my local network. So firewall add source 168.1.0/24 zone trusted. Sudo. Right. And then sudo firewall cmd add port 5984 TCP. Alright, so I've got my 2 ports in there. What was the command? Is it runtime to config? Testing my memory here. It's runtime to permanent. That's the one. There we go. So that's done. We also need to disable SE Linux, which we can do a number of ways. So sudo SE status should give us it's currently enforcing. I want to keep that persistent, so sudo nano etc Linux config. And set it to, I mean, I could set it to permissive, but for now. All right, now that I've done that, let's just give it a reboot. So now we just got to wait for the VM to reboot. Oh, it's already done. So let's just right click and choose restart session. There we go. Logged back in. Clear our terminal again. Close out the session for now. So now that it's rebooted, if I go over to my browser, we can see, and I'll zoom in a bit. If I go to my host name on 5984, I have Couch running. I believe if you go /_utils, you'll also get a web interface. So, all right, here it is. Let's not have Bitwarden do anything. And I have an empty database. Well, I have an empty server at the moment. I have 0 databases. You can just hit it, say I'm a single node and give yourself your details. Bam. I have my global changes, my replicator, and my users table. So now we can get into the Kazoo stuff, now that we've done our database. For applications to be able to talk to other applications and all this other kind of stuff, we need our event bus running. That's handled by RabbitMQ. Anything that is managed by Kazoo is prefixed with Kazoo dash, so we run our system ctl enable Kazoo dash RabbitMQ with a sudo at the start. And then we can start it and get our status. Bam, it's running. Okay, we can see Couch is running. We can see Kazoo RabbitMQ is running when we run our epmd-names. All right. You can, just reading off the install guide docs, you can, do I have curl? I do. It is running on 25672, not 15672. Is it actually running? Yeah, it is. I wonder if it wants not localhost. Very odd. I don't know if the docs that's still correct. Yeah, so I mean it's listening on 15672. So that should be running fine. Likewise, you can also run Kazoo RabbitMQ. Gosh. And get the status of your broker. Likewise, you can run, you can then set up Kamailio, which is going to be a session border controller. It's already installed because I installed everything all at the same time. So you will find etc Kazoo Kamailio. Alright, here's all our configs. Do not confuse etc Kazoo Kamailio with etc Kamailio. Likewise, do not confuse the services Kazoo-Kamailio with Kamailio. You'll confuse the living daylights out of yourself there. Likewise, one of the things you should also do is go yeah, see, by default, for whatever reason, it has the default services enabled. So disable them, and if it's already running, stop them. Because we want to enable and start the Kazoo variants. So, we saw what the config files were. The only one we need to edit is the local config. So sudo nano etc Kazoo Kamailio local config. Alright, here you can go through and enable and disable your roles. Obviously things like TLS role is going to be for your encryption. Anti-flood role is great for stopping people from flooding your server. Pusher role is if you have a app that supports push. Registrar sync role if you've got multiple nodes. SIP trace role is going to be for running your home or a HAProxy servers. Your presence sync role, again, if you're running a cluster. The traffic filter role works well, so does the ACL role, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. Again, this is not going to be on the internet, so I don't need to have any of these off. We'll go through configuring each of these ones in a later video. Going down to our server, information, put your server name here. So ao.kct is my host name. All right, and then my IP address is going to be 192.168.1.99. Likewise, you should have this not behind NAT, so have your servers hosted somewhere with an IP block that's public to the internet. I do believe this has like NAT helpers and all this kind of stuff. When I was trying to get it to run behind NAT several years ago, I had a lot of trouble, but things may have changed in the meantime. All right. It's normally going to run an SQLite database, though I do believe it supports Postgres now, which you may find a lot nicer to use. I've had to, from time to time, dump the SQLite database for Kamailio to boot properly. Disable registrar ports. This is new config from what I've seen before. As it says, though, it's all optional. There's zip trace optional settings. And again, here's your bindings. So 5060, 5061 for TLS and that kind of stuff. I do not want to bind TLS. Because I'm not going to bother with certs at the moment. Okay. As it says, though, you shouldn't have to change these yourself if you don't want to. All right. So that's my config done. One of the main things as well is the AMQP URL. All right, that should be set to wherever your RabbitMQ server is set to. All right, so at the moment, pointing to itself, perfectly fine place to go. Let's write that out. Let's see if I get it right the first time with sudo. All right, so it's going to tell me it failed. It's a problem with the config. Problem with the config for the DB. So let's just go have another look at that. Just make sure it wasn't anything I did there. Oh, need to uncomment these lines for a start. Hey, would you look at that? It's running. Helps if I uncomment the lines about what my IP address is and all that kind of stuff. Okay, if you do start to do TLS, you do have to do some memory modifications, all that kind of stuff. But once more, when we go into a deeper dive into configuring Kamailio's advanced options, we'll start dealing with some of that. Freeswitch the media server is really easy to do. As I said, it's already installed because I installed everything. Otherwise, you just install it with yum install kazoo-freeswitch. There's really no config that you need to do, though you will find you'll find everything in here, especially around the auto load configs. You may want to deal with SPNP, just around enabling T38 for your faxes and things along those lines, or turning them off if your carrier has problems with them. Yeah, you'll find some of your other, codec assignments and things like that inside of there. Otherwise, there's not a lot to do here because our apps are going to take care of everything, which is why I love Kazoo. So, sudo systemctl enable Kazoo Freeswitch systemctl start Kazoo Freeswitch. Alright, and then give our status. Cool, it's running. So if we run our fscli, hey, Freeswitch is running. At the moment, nothing's happening on it because there's nothing connected to it. But when it does, you'll start seeing text go flying past. So, at this point, you probably want to go through and set up HAProxy. Alright, this is the default config. Okay, for your CouchDB data, listens on port 15984, gives you a round robin for all your zones. This is where you go and configure it all. Alright, we only have one, so let's cut all that out. And likewise, keep in mind, like the 5986, I don't think is even used in the later versions of CouchDB, but I think it's still there in version 2. So it's there if you need it. And then you got your stats. So if we go systemctl sudo again, enable Kazoo HAProxy. Right, and sorry, just to go into that config a bit more, if you look up, essentially what you're doing here is you're saying, here's my front end, listen to myself on 15984, and then round robin for all of these. The first part's just a name, the second part's the IP. So, I mean, I should probably just call this db.aio.kct. Just so when I'm looking at the stats page, it's easy to tell what's going on. Okay, HAProxy is running. So, how do we know it's all working all right? We will go to the stats port. Now, as always, I've got to open up on the firewall. So sudo firewall-cmd zone trusted add port 23002 is the stats port on TCP. Let's just add that to permanent as well. Pretty sure it was 22002, wasn't it? But it listens only to itself, so let's just make that available to anything, not just itself. Let's restart that as well. And so if we switch over to our browser, all right, here we are on 22002. We can see HAProxy's running. We got our front end, it's open, it's been up for 2 seconds, and if we refresh, there you go, it's still up. So if we go to our terminal and I go sudo systemctl stop CouchDB, and then we go back to our browser, and let's just put it to refresh it, you'll see it is now down. Okay, so let's go back to our terminal. Start CouchDB again. And then in our browser, we'll see it's up. Now, in the HAProxy config, you can configure how long it takes before it, how long the check-ins can fail before it considers it offline. That's completely up to you. Typically, you want them to fail over quick, recover slow. In my experience. All right. So there's a lot of that. Now is the meaty bits, Kazoo applications. So, likewise, there is barely any config for this. I think it is Kazoo core config ini. Tells it where your RabbitMQ bus is, which on the local host is fine. Right. Tell Big Couch to compact automatically. Your cookie. Now this needs to match the your cookies need to match across the entire thing. And likewise, you need to configure your username and password. As always, do not do this on production. All right, now I need to go and check what I set for my cookie. Or is that in the VM? I think it's in the VM. Yeah, here we are. So whatever you got your cookie set to here, make sure they match. Otherwise I have a hard time talking. And then same with like all your apps. I don't think whistle apps is needed anymore. I'll stand corrected if this fails. And you can run Ecallmgr as its own service, but you can also get it to run underneath Kazoo apps. So likewise, I do not need this. And our cookie for all this will be you know what? Let's just duplicate what we got for Couch for now. All right. Likewise, I do believe you need to set your cookie for Kazoo Freeswitch. I forget where it's set. Let's just go grep INW. There you go. So Freeswitch auto load configs in here. Set your cookie. And I don't think there's one for Kamailio, but let's find out. Not that I saw. Let's actually just look for the word change me as well. Alright. Do we have it anywhere else left in there? For the Big Couch config, which we're not using. So, that's fine. Everything's fine now. Our core config is set. You need to do some extra steps if you want to do zones, but again, we'll go into that when we do a clustered config. All right, so let's go system ctl sudo as always. Enable Kazoo applications. Let's start it. Let's get a status. All right, it's running. All right, we don't have any action in Freeswitch at the moment because we have to connect it. And at the moment we don't have logs because we need to restart rsyslogd. Rsyslog, sorry. All right, and then now when our apps restart, they'll start writing to it. So let's just do that now anyway. System ctl restart. Not getting logs yet, so sort that out in a bit. So we know our database is running. We need to create a Kazoo user, and we need to set up our default prompts and sounds. So we can use crossbar to create our user. So sup is our our main tool here. I don't know if I have to sudo to do this, but let's find out. Let's create account. Let's call it, the name is going to be KCT. The realm is going to be ao.kct. Typically for your realm, you want it to be a subdomain of your main domain. So say you had pbx.mycompany.com, right? If you are going to sell this service to multiple other companies, you would then have theircompany.pbx.yourcompany.com, right? Because the realm is what is used heavily for authentication. That's how it does the multi-tenancy. All right, the admin user, admin, and the admin password, admin. Okay, never pick admin for the password, always. Okay, we've created our account. Now that we've created an account, I'm just going to import the media. For this, it is this command. Oop, not my cookie. I forgot to copy. Didn't copy it properly. It's sup Kazoo media maintenance import prompts, and then the path to your prompts. Okay. If you have other voice prompts, you could certainly install them here. That would be something that would be amazing to be contributed to others, is to have, you know, British English, Australian English, and other languages as well contributed to the sound package. So this is going to set up our media. This is going to take a while. So while that runs, let's open up a new tab and let's deal with suppose we can add Freeswitch to it first, then we can do the UI. So what we're going to do is check out the status of Kazoo applications first. So Kazoo applications status. All right, so sudo. All right, yeah, I have to be sudoed to do that. I don't have to create an admin user for the system, but I do have to run this. All right, these are all the apps that are running. Okay, so Black Hole, call flows, CDRs, conference, etc., etc., etc. The one main service we want here is Ecallmgr. As I said, you can always run it as its own service, but I'm going to run it as an app in here. Let me just quickly check the command. Pretty sure it's caps control is the thing. Yeah. So sup caps controller. You can see running apps, and you'll see listed in there again. So you can go start app. Okay, that's going to run Ecallmgr. That's going to be the main thing that tells or handles our calls, tells them to bridge to a call flow, all this other kind of stuff. Right, super important that runs. I think there may be a sup command to enable that by default. I typically do it in the database directly because I'm a horrible person, and you shouldn't be doing that ever. So you know what? I'll show you how it's done anyway. So let's go to our browser. Here's my database. I haven't refreshed it yet, so let's give that a refresh. All right, we have our default account. We have a bunch of other databases and so forth. All right, take note that the one with the year and month after it is the MODB, or the monthly database. This will be very important later on. You'll also end up with a shit ton of them over time. Okay, so let's go to our system config. Let's go to CAPS controller, and here's the list of the default apps that it will start whenever it boots. Ecallmgr is not in there, so I can always just... Right. Highly recommended you figure out what the sup command is to do that properly instead of editing the database directly. But that's how I've always done it. So let's just check to see how media is imported. It has. Okay. We've got our default account. Now we can add our media server into the cluster. Okay. So we've started our Ecallmgr service. So now we can go sup and target the Ecallmgr app. I would do that if I had installed Ecallmgr as its own service. As I have not, I don't need to do the -n to target the node. So all I need to do is go Ecallmgr maintenance add fs node. Right, Freeswitch at whatever the host name is. So again, if it's on a different server, you would type in that one. But we're just going to go ao.kct. And it says it already exists. So because this is an AIO server, it by default tries to connect to itself first. If there are no other configured FS nodes, it'll always try to configure to itself. Configure to connect to itself. All right. So we also need to allow the SBC to be able to deliver traffic to us. All right. So sup Ecallmgr maintenance allow SBC KCT. AO.kct. And then the IP address. So 192. What's it going to connect to itself as? Localhost. This depends on the address it's used to connect to itself. So let's just go sup Ecallmgr maintenance list fs nodes. How does it resolve? To its IP. All right. So sup Ecallmgr maintenance allow SBC AO.kct 192.168.1.99. If you had your session border controller on a different server, you would need to change the IP address, obviously. Okay, now it's allowed. Because these things are now connected under FS CLI, we should be getting activity, which we are. Okay, so we can see here it is connected. I'm getting like OKs, it knows it's alive, all that kind of stuff. Fantastic. Right. Likewise, we'd need to deal with like carrier ACLs and all this other kind of stuff as well. But we'll get into that more detail when we start talking about carriers or other Freeswitch nodes or that other kind of stuff. So as always, sudo kazoo Freeswitch status as well. Okay, it's all running. Maximum 5,000 sessions. All right. Likewise, okay, you'll get its URI, the zone, all this other kind of stuff. You got the status. Right now, I have a working phone system. It can't call anyone on public networks because I don't have an outbound carrier configured. But I could register extensions using the API and all this other kind of stuff as well. Thank goodness that 2600Hz saw fit to create a user interface. All right, it all uses JavaScript and I believe it's Apache. I don't quite remember 100%. But yum list installed. All right, so I have it installed already. I don't know if I need to install HTTPD. We'll find out. So, to configure our front end, we need to edit the config.js file. So nano etc. Oh, sorry, it's in. This lives in var monster UI JS config.js, and here you can define some of your stuff. So all right. You go configure all your stuff. All right, you can create all your nav stuff, where your port forms are, all that kind of stuff. All right. So there's a lot of your configs here. You can also see the list of configurable options here. I don't know if that is on the rebased. It works. Perfect. So if we switch over to our browser, it's going to tell you all the configurable settings. Okay. You can configure the API if you are putting your web front end somewhere other than where your apps node is. So the one that runs Kazoo-applications is the one that's going to be exposing an API. Obviously, you'd have to allow it through your firewall, all that kind of stuff. So this gives you a JavaScript front end that runs queries directly from the client over to your API server. I believe here it is. So by default, it will do it to window location hostname plus 8000/v2. So whatever the URI is in the web browser is how it's gonna build the API endpoint. Okay, likewise, you can configure your provisioners and all this other kind of stuff as well. So feel free to read through this for all the millions of available options, including things like SSO and all this other kind of stuff. So I don't need to configure a different API because it's all going to be the AIO.kct. So let's just write that. Now, what we need to do is we need to initialize our apps. You know what, I knew I would forget something. I didn't sudo it, so let's just go. I'll leave some of that there. There you go. Now I've saved it. Great. To initialize our apps, we run crossbar maintenance. All right. And then it is init apps, I believe, and then the path to our apps folder. So you can see above, it'll be var or HTML monster UI, and then we have an apps folder. Okay. And then the callback endpoint. So the address to your URI. Now, I highly recommend putting this behind HAProxy and creating a Let's Encrypt cert that auto renews and all this other kind of stuff as well, so that you do not run your API over plain text. Again, go into this more detail in another video. So, kct AIO.kct port 8000/v2. Okay, so this is going to tell it whenever it tries to load one of these apps that there's the API endpoint. This is fantastic that if you want to init specific apps and run them across different apps nodes, you can distribute the load or figure out which one's doing what. While that does that, well, did it pretty much damn straight away. I would love it if the commercial arm of 2600Hz would let me connect my app to a server, or connect one of the paid for apps to a server they control. I understand why they don't want to give away their apps in the community edition, because once you read the source code, you could just steal it, all that kind of stuff. So you'd pay for it once, then run that version for forever. I'd like to think people are more honest than that, but I don't see any reason why they couldn't run their own apps node that you could connect to, instead of having to pay them for running the entire Kazoo infrastructure for you. They can just run the licensed apps on their own servers that we can connect to. I would love it if they'd make that an option, and so then you can license the individual apps at a more affordable option for like the people trying to get into the field at the entry level. So now that those apps are initialized, we do need something to serve Monster UI. So we do need HTTP. You could use something like Nginx or anything of your flavor, as long as it can serve HTML and JS and CSS and all that kind of stuff. So sudo yum install yhttpd. Cool. Sudo nano etc httpd confd and then ao.kct.conf. So now I have a config file, and this is just like Apache. So virtual host star 80. If I want it to run on port 80, document root what HTML monster UI server name ao.kct and my virtual host start and enable it. Do I get a web page? Yes, I do. Okay. If I do not localhost, I actually do ao.kct. I would hope that it loaded my virtual environment. Did I miss something? Probably. But while I'm here anyway, sudo firewall cmd add zone trusted add port 80 TCP. You could also add the HTTP service. That will just allow it through the firewall. All right. So we do need HTTPD to load our virtual environment. It's not writing anything out. So etc HTTPD. Oh, hang on. Sudo lsal file log. All right. So it does have log files there. I just got to remember I got to sudo everything. What do I want? I want I should have an include here. Include optional conf d. Did I put it in the right place? It's not sorry. And you probably shouldn't run HTTPD as root. find you. Do I even need the quotes? Hang on, let's just try it. I don't need the quotes. I think that might have been the problem. So, if we go to our browser, hey, we got a web interface. Now, earlier on, we used crossbar to create a user. So we can use that to log in and check out this system. So let's just check in KCT. Oh, sorry, it's admin, and KCT is our account. So the account is a good way for like having different tenants. So let's hit sign in. Bam, welcome to the platform. Let's get started. It'll take you through like all the user interface options. All right, so I'm going to skip all of that. All right. Let's just zoom out a tiny bit. We have our app exchange. All right, we're just going to have your accounts. CSV onboarding is new. So I need to update my stuff. Call flows, faxes, number manager, PBX connector, smart PBX voicemails, and webhooks. So they've really worked on the App Store, so I can see a lot of stuff happening here, and I'd love to develop more apps for this for the open source community. If you would love to develop apps for this as well, things to manage your carriers would be fantastic, I'll tell you that much. But that said, though, a lot of the time I just do it in the database, set it, forget it, and call it a day. So 2 ways to deal with setting up call flows and that kind of stuff would be through the Call Flows app or through Smart PBX. But we do not create an account. We do not configure a phone system under our root account. We would create a sub-account. So let's create accounts. Let's turn the app on. Let's make it available only to us, because I don't want anyone else creating accounts. Right, call flows, however, can be on for admins, and same with Smart PBX. All right, faxes can be on for all users, so can voicemails. I'm not going to use webhooks at the moment, not going to use a PBX connector, and because I don't have any carriers, I'm not going to use the number manager just yet. Again, we'll get into that more a little bit later. So if we go into our app launcher now, we now have these apps available to us. So we can now go into accounts and create a new account. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do is create things like service plans and all that kind of stuff. You're going to want to do that either through the API or directly in the database. Naughty if you do it through the database. Really learn to get to use the API would be my recommendation. Some of these defaults here as well, I believe you can configure either through the API or through the database as the defaults. I do believe it's like derived from this user, so let's just... I am in Australia, so let's set that. English. Save it. Right, we'll go through configuring emailing later. All right, and your format mode for international numbers, all that kind of stuff, and your account name and your account ID. You're going to need the account ID a lot for the technical stuff. All right, I am not in America. I am in Australia. English. Save. I wish this was like a configurable option where I could put in the regex for it. All right, the number of the service plan that I have, it has no option to create one. So an app to create and manage service plans would be fantastic. Transactions, if I had any transactions, I can limit the number of trunks I have, all that kind of stuff. But we'll, again, go into that stuff later. So let's go and create an account. Let's just hit cancel. So I want to see if that picks up. Did not pick up my country, so... Did pick up my time zone though. So let's create a KCT user. Actually, the account name, KCTU. There you go, for user. And then I can go user.aio.kct for my realm. Right. Put in your service address, 123. Alright, that is not a real address. Alright, account contacts. There is contract information here. Technical contact information, billing contact information, all optional. You can limit the number of trunks that they have. So I'm just going to set it to like 5 and 5, or why would you do it like that when you can have 5 two-way trunks? The main difference, by the way, by going like this would be you can have 5 inbound, 5 outbound at the same time, where this would be 5 outbound or 5 inbound or some combination thereof. So like 1 in, 4 out, so forth. All right. Allow them to make per minute calls. Call restrictions. So these again are all configurable through the API or through the database. I'm just going to have everything on at the moment. And an initial credit balance. So I give myself $500. Right, what they have access to. Right, what applications they're allowed to access. And then here's review all the settings. And I'm going to hit create account. All right, so it had a problem with setting up app restrictions. So, you know what, I'll leave it all on, but here you could turn them off. Okay, create some notes, set your carrier. All right, you can either have carriers specific for this account, use system-wide ones, all this other kind of stuff. All right, again, we'll deal with that stuff later. Now, at the moment, I'm still in the admin account, but I want to start creating call flows and devices under this user. So let's go to the account jump and go to KCTU. So we are now masquerading as this person. All right, Smart PBX is the easy way to do things. If you just need a basic phone system that has extensions, devices, and a main number that calls a group of users, that's fantastic. If you want to do some more advanced, tricky call flows that do some recording in between, or maybe does some pivots and all this other kind of stuff, you then want to probably target more call flows. I am very comfortable inside of call flows. I don't like using the Smart PBX system, but feel free to try it out, have a play, create your sub accounts, mess with them, delete them when you no longer need them, and so forth. Okay, so I need a device. Create a device, create a VoIP phone, call it Demo 1. Right, notify when unregistered will email the technical contact on this account every time they drop registration. Annoying as hell. Can be useful if they're complaining about dropped registrations. Turn it on, you'll get notified each time. All right, under advanced, you can go through and set their caller ID, select their presence number. Let's make it like 101. All their caller ID information, emergency numbers. You can go through, create their username and password, put their expiry in. You know, 360 is a bit low. 3600 is probably a bit high, but that's going to be fine for me. Outbound flags if you need them, which again we'll get into later. Types of codecs that you will allow. So UNA are very common. 722 if you've got like Yelinks, or 729, sorry, if you've got Yelinks and all that kind of stuff. Now, Freeswitch isn't going to have the license for it. You can go and buy one, but there is an open source codec for 729. Opus, however, is fantastic, but it's quite CPU heavy. For the moment, I'm just going to leave it on UNA. Video stuff, which you can also do. This will set SIP headers. So again, if you've got like Yelinks or other phones that will pay attention to SIP headers, you can give it custom rings. If this is attached to this is an ATA attached to a fax, you might want T38. Ignore completed elsewhere is going to be if you're in a ring group and someone in that ring group picks it up other than you, ticking ignore completed elsewhere will show the call is being missed, right? Despite the fact it got picked up by someone else. Typically, you're going to want that off very often. Okay, there you go. I've got a device. It's red because it's unregistered. So let's create a call flow. No match call flow is what it's going to do if it doesn't match anything else. So it's going to try and go through carriers. If you had a number, but we're just going to create an extension and we're going to call it 777. All right, and then you can get it to play media or go to a voicemail or go to a menu, ring groups, all this other kind of stuff. So it's from this point on, you can build your call flows. All right. So the system's set up. It will work. We can certainly see in our terminal, we will have traffic happening through Freeswitch. There we go. And if I register a device, which I will do in another video to show you, you will see all the registration attempts go through. Okay. So there's an AIO server. The thing it's not going to do at the moment is make a call to public networks because you don't have carriers configured. You may also have problems completing calls because you haven't set up your Johnny 5 and limits and all this other kind of stuff, things that do the call ratings and stuff like that, saying this is how much this call is going to cost, which we'll cover through in another video. But these are all the services installed. They're all running. Database is running. Freeswitch is running. Kamailio is running. RabbitMQ is running. So here you have a base system to start mucking around with. Until next time.